Good morning. I'm Rita Norton, a member of the Forum Committee that organizes these platforms for the discussion of significant issues, especially those that involve ethical values in the contemporary world. Now is the time to turn off your phones for the whole program. FYI, we are being recorded for in-church use and for probable broadcast on KKFI. There have been two different descriptions for this morning's program. Take your pick. Both are general enough that they're both, that neither is actually inaccurate. One had something to do with then and now. George has a brand new home solar power system. Mine is almost 12 years old. Also, I'm not really talking about solar power, but George is. And so, without further delay, here is George Hoech to talk about his stuff.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. You're right. Well, let me see if I can figure this out. There. Do any of you recognize this building? It's a satellite view of... That's right. How many of you knew that there were solar panels on the roofs here? Most of you. Well, my friend George Baggett didn't. I'm sorry. I won't mention anything about pipe bombs. He used to give me a lot of static when he'd come over the house and talk to our Alexa. Okay, I'll try to... But that's a different story. One of the reasons I installed solar panels was I was worried about the effects of greenhouse gases and whatnot, and I wanted to reduce my carbon footprints. These show the effects of carbon. See if I can figure it out. We have methane. See if I can read that. The dark red is nitrous oxygen, and then we have a couple refrigerants. Now, according to the book Drawdown, the number one cause of global warming is refrigerants. And as we get more global warming, more people are going to be using more refrigerants, more air conditioning and whatnot. So we're kind of in a catch-22 here. And also, as the planet warms, the frost line is moving closer to the poles by about 10 miles a year. And that releases a lot of methane when the methyl hydrate that's stored in this permafrost melts. Okay, let's see if I can figure out how to do next slide. Okay, this is the latest data from Hawaii. They have an observatory up there where they keep track of the CO2. The red line, this ziggy line, is the yearly changes in CO2, and then the black line is the average. And since 2018, we've gained another 3 points in the last year. And before the industrial age, the CO2 level was 280 parts per million. Okay. Why did I want to install solar panels on my house? As I mentioned earlier, to reduce the carbon footprint, to reduce my utility bills because I'm cheap, and increase the reliability of my electrical system. I live in Fairway, and we have a lot of trees, and every time we have ice storm, windstorm, whatnot, we lose power for anywhere from 2 hours to... The 2002 one took us out for 8 days. And also, I'm irritated by what the government's doing. When Trump left the Paris Accord and also his tariff with China increased the price of my solar panels by 10 cents a watt. That kind of irritated me. And I go to JCC most of the time, part-time, as an old guy taking cheap courses. And I got a degree in solar at there, and I wanted to use that. And also I had the time and resources to install it. plus taking another solar class. I glommed onto a lot of the students there and helped me put it in. Okay, this is my system. I have 32, basically 240 watt panels, and they're coupled to 32 in-phase microinverters, and it's mounted on a Iron Ridge mounting system. Now, let's see if what I have next. Okay, this is my system to make it a little easier. There are 32 solar panels laid out in a row. The Iron Ridge support system. Now, this is at a 30-degree angle. And, see, let me see if, okay, I'll go to the next slide. There. This is how I sized my system. Basically what I had room for. I have 32 panels in a south-facing exposure. My system is roughly 52 by 13, has 688 square feet. It's rated for actual usable power is 8.6 kW. This data here for KC is at 39. And I have a paper on NREL data that goes into detail, but if I put it up there, you couldn't read it anyway. So it basically says we get an average of 4.9 hours of good sunlight a day here. That's average all year. It's about 3 in the winter and maybe 6.5 in the summer. System gives me 44 kW a day on average. I use 66 because I'm an energy hog. So this system will produce about 2/3 of my power. Payback, well, we'll see. Using that average of 44 kW a day and 10 cents a kW, my system should save me $4.40 a day. Times 365 gives me roughly $16.06 a year. System cost was roughly $20,000, and I should get a payback in 12.5 years. Luckily, there's a tax rebate on this of 30%, so that cuts my payback down to about 8 years. Okay, disclaimers, of course. If KCP&L likes to stay in business and they like to make money selling electricity, and so they may change the law or whatever they can do to make me pay more money because I have a solar panel. The second disclaimer is if my calculations are okay, which I think they are, and the panels inverters are warranted for, like, the panels output are warranted for 25 years and 10 years for workmanship, but I don't know what can go wrong with a panel. And then the inverters are warranted for 25 years, so it should be good there. Here it is. Okay, this is how my system is set up. My panels are there. We live here. This is our house. A line runs there into my basement panels. I have shutoffs there, and then main shutoffs there, and my utility meters there. Here it is again. My solar system. I have like 14 of these posts, and they're 40 inches underground and 20 inches above ground in concrete, so they're in 5 feet of concrete. This system, and I had a little trouble getting it approved, is because the authority having jurisdiction wanted a Kansas PE to certify it, so we finally got that done, and then I got it in. This thing's good for 100 miles an hour, wind. Unfortunately, my neighborhood isn't. Okay, there, okay. You can see, did I skip it? Yeah, I did. All right. This is the underside of my system. You can see some of the inverters there and the wiring. I got a better picture here. This shows I have 8 strings of, or 4 strings of 8 panels each for 32. There are my in-phase inverters. there's 8 of them, and they feed into here. They put out 220 volts. Now this system is what you call a rapid shutdown system. So if we lose power from KCP&L, it shuts everything down. And it shuts down the output from these inverters. The reason they do that is because if the power went out and it didn't shut this down, this would backfeed into the transformer and could just shock the crap out of a utility worker. So it's a safety thing, and that's one of the features about this that is very important. Okay, this is, all my panels run into here. I have, oops, got a little carried away there. I have there's two 2-pole circuit breakers in each one of these, and they tie into this, my pointer's a little iffy, but they run into those shut-off panels. Here's my feed panels. I have a big system. I put in a heat pump and resistance backup about 12, 14 years ago, and I needed 400 amp service, so they brought it in as 200 amp panels. Okay, this, try it again. Nah, it's not. Anyway, there, I'm feeding into the bottom of these panels. You see solar A and solar B. Well, that's where each cable goes into the panel. Here's my feed, utility meters and shutoffs. Okay, here is probably the most important part. Photovoltaic versus photosynthesis. Now, I don't know if you all know, but photosynthesis is really not very efficient. Although we all depend on it for all of our food and whatnot, it's not that efficient. Normal crops are about 1%. Sugarcane is 8%. And in Brazil, they use that for renewable energy. That ethanol they had was popular a few years ago. But if you're trying to make electricity out of a biomass, again, you're only going to get about 40% of that 1% or 8%. So it's not real efficient. Now, the solar panels range at 15 to 22% efficiency for turning sunlight into electricity, which is pretty good. And it can be installed in unproductive areas all over. What you may not have realized, the Romans pretty much deforested Europe just to heat their homes and baths way back when. And also, I think in Missouri at the turn of the century, 1800s, they pretty much took all the forests out of Missouri, just heating homes with renewable energy. So I think this solar is really a pretty good answer to the global warming crisis. Okay. What are you going to do to reduce your carbon footprint? Well, this is a nasty plug here. How much pollution are you going to allow the fossil fuel companies to dump into your atmosphere? You can install a solar system, buy an electrical vehicle, or get an energy audit for your home and follow the recommendations, of course. And you can also add LED lighting to help reduce your carbon footprint. You can lobby for the support of wind and solar farms and hydro and other renewables. Well, how large of an area would you need to provide your household and transportation energy needs at 10 cents a watt? Well, my system puts out about 14 watts per square foot. And if I would double my area, I would exceed my home energy use of 66 kilowatt hours a day, and it would allow me 22 watts to run an electrical vehicle. Now, EVs get about 3 miles per kilowatt hour, so that would give me about 66 miles range on an EV per day. We only drive about 30 miles a day, so we're okay there. Okay, miscellaneous information. The sun gives us 1,000 watts per square meter, just direct facing. Of course, that's If you cut the planet in half and do the area, that's the energy we get. But it's on a semi-sphere, so part of it gets reflected and whatnot. Commercial solar now, commercial wind can be produced for about 2 cents a kilowatt hour now, and commercial solar is down to about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's kind of enlightening. Energy value of a gallon of gasoline is 33 kilowatt hours per gallon. Diesel is 39 kilowatt hours per gallon. Most electrical vehicles get about 100 miles per gallon equivalent of gasoline. And again, as I mentioned before, that's 3 kilowatt hours per mile, or 3 miles per kilowatt hour. Okay. If you're looking for resources for reducing your carbon footprint, I'm on the board of the Heartland Renewable Energy site. Here is their website, and they have a link to all sorts of solar vendors and energy efficient people to help you set up something if you want to do that way. The book Drawdown has a lot of, by Paul Hawkins, is the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. We're supposed to have at the Heartland Renewable all the local sites for carbon footprint reduction and energy improvement. The Climate Council of Greater Kansas City is also another place to go for information. And I think this is it for me. Did I take too little time?
No, that's fine.
Okay. And now up is Rita for her part of the presentation. Did I startle you, Rita?
No.
Let me get rid of my stuff.
Don't pick up my pages.
Oh, did I get them?
I don't know. They seem to have disappeared. My words have disappeared.
Okay. Well, passing the baton takes a little effort.
Yeah, and there's a universe of difference between what George and I have to say. I'm going to say that his is so much more elaborate than my system that even though I hear the prices have dropped 80 to 90% for this stuff in the last 12 years, I'm going to guess that he spent more than I did. Because his system is really sophisticated. Well, my system's fine. It's just a great deal older. Okay, you've got your solar power system. And after gleefully watching whatever type of monitor you have in order to actually see some evidence of solar energy service for at-home electricity, after enjoying a really comfortable house while using only a minimum of fossil fuel, what comes next? Theo is going to pass out an old-fashioned handout to you at this point while paper, and it's color, which is really expensive. So if there's more than one person in your row, you can share. Anyway, for me, motivated originally to make the change to solar power by the re-election of George W. Bush, and having grown increasingly involved in both the politics and the science of climate, and having gone through the small inheritance that it enabled energy remodeling on school teacher incomes. That's the name of my project, energy remodeling on school teacher incomes. Having gone through that small inheritance that had enabled the program in the first place, I found that I really had a lot more to do. Originally, I had wanted to use my house as a real-life example of how ordinary middle-income people could make a difference in our oil-sodden lifestyles. I had lucked out back in 2006, 2007, and finding quite a few dedicated people to help me with what we called energy remodeling. Beyond the exceptionally competent addition of solar panels to my south roof, and state-of-the-art inverters that continue to make KCPL compatible alternating current from solar power's direct current, as well as 2,800 pounds of still cooking lead acid batteries for storing unused solar power. Several low-cost adjustments were made to my public school teacher's house to enable comfort without the use of fossil fuels. A 50-ish architect, somewhat disenchanted with efforts to interest mainstream architects in designing structures specifically for decreasing the use of fossil fuels, designed adjustments to the south face of my house that would enable direct sun warmth to be utilized on cold but sunny days. These work, not miraculously, but moderately, even though the actual building contractor cut corners that shouldn't have been cut. Here on that handout that Theo passed out are some old-fashioned images to give you an idea. Please share. Color copies are expensive. If you'll look at the side with the energy remodeling label that has a yellow sun on the right and an artist's rendition of the front of a house on the left, you'll get an idea of these sun heat attracting additions to the sunshine-rich south side of the house. That yellow smudge on the right is a low winter sun. First, the roof extension. This Cape Cod house has dormer windows on the second floor that set back about 5 feet from the front of the first floor of the structure. The roof extends only a few inches beyond the very front surface of the front floor. If you want other pictures of the house, you can open it up. Here's the roof with the solar panels on it. And down here with the fairy ring, which I lost in all this process, which is sad. This is what the house looked like before I started. Cape Cod house has dormer windows on the second floor that set back about 5 feet from the front of the first floor of the structure. The roof extends only a few inches beyond the very front surface of the first floor. This is great for natural lighting, but also makes for lots of direct sunlight into the south side of the house. That direct sunlight extended a full half length of the rooms, south to north. Impossible to cool in the summer. So the roof was extended about 6 feet beyond the front of the first floor. The lower winter sun could still shine into the first floor rooms, but the higher summer sun does not shine directly into the first floor of the house. Think about it for a moment, and you can see that that's going to save a lot of cooling costs. Understanding the specifics of the math and geometry of sun angles in relation to various spots on the planet is not necessary to use the sun's heat for serving your own comfort. But recognizing that the relationship between two separate orbs, one of which is constantly moving, the sun's movement not perceptible in terms of human lifespans, the Earth and the sun, changing helps a great deal if you want to take advantage of the sun's ray without the technology of solar panels. By the way, several times in the past 11 years, on cloudy days, various well-educated friends have commented that it was a shame that my panels were not able to generate power on cloudy days. If there's daylight, there's solar power. George and my solar panels didn't generate as much power on cloudy Thursday and Saturday as they did on sunny Friday, but they were generating power on all those days. Much more successful than those boxes on the south side of the house were the much cheaper additions to the house for maintaining desirable temperatures. That is, to moderate temperatures in summer and in winter. Mostly cellulose insulation. This, and Theo's going to walk around with this bucket, and you can touch it and look at it. Please don't scatter it all over the floor. I know the church would not appreciate it. But this is cellulose insulation. And it was blown into all the walls of my house, as well as added to the attic and to the space beneath the first floor. Blown cellulose has the advantage of being gap-free, which means that nature's temperatures that I don't want in the house have less access to the house. This cellulose has also been treated with fire retardant and insect repellent. A bunch of inexpensive devices from the hardware store for doors and electrical outlets are also available. I have here some of the best ones for doors. I'll get to these in a little more detail in a few moments. These are brushes for the bottom of the doors. These go around the doors themselves. They work wonderfully. They work amazingly. And not only that, if you take some of these, I have somebody who'll install them for you free. Okay, sorry about that. Also, over a period of about 5 additional years, I added double-paned windows to the north and west sides of the house. For educational purposes, as well as running out of money, I left the original 1940 windows on the east side of the house. They illustrate the importance of awareness of what's happening in the natural world as far as heat and cold are concerned, and the relevance of one's geographical location. My neighbor to the east is about 15 feet away from my house. The neighbor on the west, probably 30 or 40 feet. There's simply less opportunity for rapid temperature change on the east side of the house than on the west side of the house. Also, of course, most of our weather systems come from the west. Before I move away from the topic of observing how natural conditions affect heating and cooling, let me mention something about my really tacky single-car garage that's on the west. That's where the storms come from the west, on the west side of the house. The garage opening is on the south side. A swollen, misshapen, broken single-person door from the garage to the backyard is on the north. You already know that prevailing weather systems in the northern hemisphere tend to run from west to east. The west side of a house is more likely to get weathered than the other sides. The worst time of day for summer heat is late afternoon on the west. Of course, the west side of my house, like all the other sides, is cellulose insulated. And that is wonderful stuff, folks. Incredible. For that west side of the house attached garage, which is about 9 feet shorter than the west side of the house, cellulose insulation was added to the garage ceiling only. The west wall of the house, like the rest of the house, is cellulose insulated. The door from the house to the garage is, of course, as old as the house and not perfectly rectangular. But a flap was added to the bottom. Oops, I gotta be at the microphone. Flap was added to the bottom. I lost my place. Worst time. Flap was added to the bottom, and a tube-like thing about 3/4 of an inch wide was added to the edges of the door. After I've driven, which is far too often for someone who is trying to avoid fossil fuels, weather determines what I do with the southern overhead garage door. If it's hot, I leave both the overhead garage door and the crippled back door open, has to be propped open, until the heat of the car has dissipated. Fortunately, the neighbors haven't complained. More remarkably, however, is what does not happen in cold weather in that west room that opens to that hot, hot garage. The southern overhead garage door gets closed. I don't want to simply throw away that car heat. Nevertheless, the heat of the car does not penetrate either the wall or the door into the house. On cold winter days, I might want some of that car heat, but the insulation and door barriers to the house are simply too good for that to happen. Part 2, shorter than part 1. Going to have plenty of time for questions. After energy remodeling. Except for that periodic addition of double-pane windows from about 2010 to 2012, no additional energy remodeling has occurred at my house. Now, after the period of forced learning, finally, for various reasons, it became time for the mundane. I must say, the beautiful mundane. I've watched and felt and absorbed the immersion of the house and me into the natural environment that's out there regardless of city streets and city codes. For a couple of years, I looked for an affordable way to add a so-called permeable driveway, a driveway that, instead of rushing rainwater down to the street, a driveway that would allow some of rain's absorption into the soil. I eventually realized that I already had a permeable driveway of sorts, by virtue of my driveway being cracked and broken asphalt instead of concrete. One can pay attention to natural environment regardless of city streets and city codes, because regardless of human attempts to subdue the natural's out there anyway. Right down to the microbes and bacteria that enable the use of earthbound nitrogen to grow green things, and to nourish underground bugs to live and contribute to the sustenance that enables life. Use and pay attention to what you know. Not because it's going to end climate disruption or because it saves you money. Pay attention to and use what you know because it makes sense. You know that getting up early in the morning during the summer can enable you to open the apartment or house to let in fresh, relatively coolish air. We know in summer to cover west and south windows to block direct sun, and we know in cold weather, if those windows are tight enough, to let that giant heater that is direct sunshine into the house. Pay attention and use what you know also, because doing so can make us more appreciative of the natural world, as well as avoiding fossil fuel use. That appreciation can contribute to the realization that all life is connected, not just families and cultures and species, but all life. And that awareness can be enriching regardless of the losses that are occurring because we forgot for so long that all life is connected. And now it's time for the ushers to take money for the church. Now, please remember the rules for questions. Come to the mic to ask your question, one question per person until everyone has had an opportunity to ask a question. And please, no speeches. We'll have some conversation time after 11. And by the way, I have party gifts, so to speak, back in the library. And if you come, you have something to take home with you. Something fairly valuable. Besides these things that I'm giving away. Also, please speak clearly and into the microphone.
Thank you, Rita and George. Great stuff. Rita, I really appreciate you talking about the deeper picture as well as the technology. And also thank you for focusing so much on the energy remodeling, the weatherization aspect of it. If you tighten up your home, you don't need to buy as many solar panels to run it. You don't need as large a heat pump, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the first step. So, Rita, one thing you could not benefit from because of the time you installed your system originally was the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program that was passed by the General Assembly in 2010 and made available. Are you able to talk about that? If not, I will take prerogative to say a little bit about it.
I'll let you say something, but because I haven't recalled all those details. However, the timing was such that as my panels and the inverters and the whole thing system came online, that was precisely when Missouri was passing laws relevant to that. I do sell to KCP&L, and that's why my electric bill is as low as it is. It's very low.
So just to say a little bit about it, and I'm no expert because I don't own a house. I'm not buying a house on mortgage, so I haven't actually used it. And I don't think you have the option in Kansas because Kansas doesn't have this law. So it's called Property Assessed Clean Energy, or PACE. And what it essentially does is it avoids having to pay the whole cost up front for a system. It's available here in Jackson County, and essentially what it does is it tacks the cost on to your property tax payment every year, extended over time. I can't tell you more details than that. And if you sell the house, it goes with the house. So if you're interested in doing this in your home, you can not have to pay the $20,000 right up front to pay for it. Property Assessed Clean Energy. Renovate America is the local, and I don't work for them. Renovate America is the local administration for the program in Jackson County, from what I understand. George, would you? Yeah.
I believe there are some cheap loans available in Kansas for energy remodeling.
It works a little different.
Well,
it's not the same as the Property Assessed Clean Energy. I'm not familiar with those. Perhaps folks who want to know about that talk to George.
I'm aware of them, but I never used them, so I don't really know the details.
I guess that counts as one question.
Maybe 20. Shut up, George.
Thanks. George,
Yes.
Did KCP&L have when I put my system in, which was in 2016, KCP&L had a program where you got a certain amount of money from them. Was that around when you did yours?
I wasn't aware of it. I did take the tax rebate, but I didn't get anything back from KCP&L. Go ahead.
Hello. First of all, I wanted to thank you both for taking the time to provide the information. The subject fascinates me, and I've been studying it for many years now and just received my associate's degree in my green energy field studies. Now, this question is, thank you. This question is directed towards you. I was curious, how and where did you receive the rest of your education? I'm finding it very difficult to find the classes and find the information, and it almost seems at times that not many people are willing to share this information for many good reasons. So I really would love to get to the point where you're at and install these systems in my own home, and I have designs in mind, but I need to further my education. So I was just curious where you...
Are you on the Kansas or the Missouri side?
Missouri side.
I'm not sure what the metropolitan community colleges have. I know Johnson County has photovoltaic.
Very little.
Pardon?
Very little. That's where I've received some already.
And the one down on Front Street?
That's where I've received my associates, but they only go so far with it.
They do a lot of HVAC down there. I don't.
Yep, that's really where they focus.
Okay, I'm not aware then. Johnson County side, we had a solar program, solar EV, and one for basically training energy auditors. But we've lost that, and the solar PV has been rolled into the electrical program. So I'm not sure what happened, why we lost it. But
Right.
But I would also say find people, live people who give a damn. There's an organization here in Kansas City. I checked it out on the website recently, and it is still there. Without them, I have no idea what would have happened to me. The Metropolitan Energy Center. And you find people. You find people who want more people to know, and they're willing to teach. Yeah, and I have a few specific names that I'll give to you privately, and definitely you, like everybody else, need to come to the library afterwards for your freebies.
When I was taking the energy performance and resource management at JUCO, or the energy auditing, we had a guy from there, was one of our teachers. It was Justin, what? Forget his name. Dustin Jensen. And then he got married and changed his name, so I don't know what it is right now.
He has spoken here.
George, solar panels generate direct current, and I guess those inverters.
That's right.
Inverters change it to what's on the grid, which is alternating current.
Right.
What percent do you lose when you go to alternating current? And is there anybody out there who is avoiding that step by being off the grid? And are there enough appliances that run on direct current to make that possible?
Well, appliances that run on direct current can get pretty expensive. And coming from Idaho, yes, there's a lot of people out there that are off the grid. And see, what else? What was the first part of your question? Lose about maybe 17, 18% on the conversion. Just doing, if you looked at my slide, see, I can maybe go back to that. Is that it? Okay, it starts out at 1088 DC and it changes to almost, so I'm losing close to 17, 18%. Is that what you want to know? But still, if you're going to have a grid-tied system, you're going to have to take that loss somewhere.
That's actually a fairly significant loss. So if you were in a situation where you could do it, there would be an advantage to living your life on direct current, if that's possible.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of AC stuff out there, so it's going to take a while to make a change. It's sort of like going from fossil fuels to alternate energy. It'll take a week or two, and there's going to be a lot of resistance.
I have a question about recycling these panels. I mean, they will break, be destroyed, or whatever. So, and I'm concerned about landfills. So, I just had a question about recycling.
I have no idea. Hopefully they'll outlast me and it won't be a problem. For me anyway, for the next generation. We're dumping on them pretty hard.
The separate parts, probably most of the separate parts are recyclable, but it's going to require disassembly of them.
That was my understanding when I was learning about them. It's like they could be reworked into making new ones.
Right. Right.
Great.
Thank you. Yes.
We're 2 blocks into Kansas, and we're BPUers. So when we went to the meeting on drawdown over at the library, we ended up signing up for the community solar panels, and we bought some of those.
Great.
And they're relatively, I don't want to quote, but they're not a high percentage of our total electric bill. But what are your thoughts for people who don't own houses, renters and stuff, relative to what do you know about community solar across the United States and here in Kansas and
Not
Missouri?
as much as I want to, and I would like to get involved. As far as, I know I've been to that talk too about where BPU was present. And I think Mr. Vollen was there also. And you have some of that stock too, don't you? Oh.
I believe it was 10, right? Yeah. That was let's give him a hand. That was the max he could do.
What's the payback on that? It's like 5% or something. It's better than you can get on interest, but. Okay, it's money. Well, as you can see by my calculations, I'm an energy hog.
About 10 years ago, we had a speaker whose name I can't call up, who talked about community power. And he also talked about community internet. And part of the conclusion was that there had been quite a bit of resistance to building things community-wise. Also, the man who supplied the cellulose insulation and these things to make your doors and windows wonderful, he has periodically over the last 30, 40 years been trying to get parts of the city, housing associations, especially on the east side, together to make improvements as a volunteer activity in the way of energy remodeling and better insulation, the whole thing. There's a lot of resistance to that. And there's a lot of need to ask the mayoral and city council candidates what they want to do about that. Because they do have the power. Kansas City is doing some pretty neat things right now as far as using alternative energy. But it can go further than that. A lot can be done for a lot of structures. But it needs government cooperation.
I only know of one house in our neighborhood that has solar panels on the roof. I was wondering if you know whether geothermal units in the ground are applicable to bigger areas. Linda Hall Library does their heating and cooling from ground temperature, and our favorite college in Minnesota has just finished installing those two, but they're both use quite a lot of space to set these in, and they're also heating and cooling much bigger areas than a residential house.
I saw this being done, geothermal being added to a private house, probably in Fairway.
There's two in Fairway.
Okay, I don't know what it costs, but I know it can be done. I looked into it myself, but I didn't have the space, the literal space for it. It's out there. There's just not much going on.
It's fairly expensive. I think it's like $40K to put a system in. You have the two in our neighborhood had some pretty deep wells, and it's a great idea. I want to try it. If I get my wife's rolling her eyes back just a lot. But, you know, it is a spendy. But instead of going, like in the winter, you're against like minus a 30-degree low temperature, and in the summer it's 90. You're a delta T, you're against 60 degrees roughly. So it's a lot less energy required to run a heat pump. Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Rita and Craig will probably argue, but when I set out to walk here this morning, I was not intending to insert myself as a third resource speaker, but I have some information relevant to Mike's question. Community solar, where you go in with other people and pay for part of the output of a solar farm, is not available to my knowledge in Missouri in our area right now. But anybody who gets their power from KCP&L can sign up to get power through Arcadia Power, which you can get, I think it's 80% clean energy for no additional cost. It's 50 only? I thought it was higher. Okay, or you can pay a little more than you're paying KCP&L and get 100% clean energy. Now your power comes through the same grid, and the grid is all the grid, but it does directly support clean energy. This has been vetted by people who care, like the Sierra Club. It's real. So you can go to Arcadia Power and simply switch over, and even a renter like me and Ruckme, and get 100% clean energy for a little more. And it's worth it, if you ask me.
Can we do it on the Kansas side?
Any KCP&L customer can do that.
Now, KCP&L talks about adding demand charges. Would I be able to avoid the demand charges?
I don't know where that stands. That's a whole, you got to deal with the legislatures on that kind of stuff. You have to be an advocate too. If nobody else is waiting with a question, George. Oh, okay. Great.
I also have a geothermal system, and it costs about 2.5 times of a conventional system. We have a 360-foot well in our yard. Now we have a 2/3 of an acre lot, so we live way south, and we have it in there. And it does have a significant effect. It is much more effective in the summertime than it is in the wintertime, because the maximum you're going to see in the wintertime is you're using 56-degree water to preheat the air. Instead of bringing it up from -10, you can get it up to like 30. But then you still have to reheat it to get it up to anything that you can use. But it does help.
Do you have gas or resistance heat backup?
Unfortunately, we could not get gas because of the location of our air handling unit. They would not. The code wouldn't allow us to put gas in, so we have to use electricity. So, but last summer I had 2 months where KCP&L actually had to give me money.
Oh, great!
Between the systems, we've had the system for 3 years, and it's the first time it had happened. I say give me money, it was about $2, but they did have to do it.
Hey, you're on the plus side.
Oh, Carolyn.
Get be lowered? There, okay, thank you. I was going through my email and there was one that said something about solar power. So I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to be hearing 2 people talk about this at the forum. So I looked, and in it there was a person who by trade was a carpenter and was trying to find an inexpensive way to get solar power, and spent a couple years studying different things, and then built this little thing that looked kind of like a series of small ladders that was portable and had a number of solar panels on it that were small, about like that, turned, at the right angle. Anyway, the pitch was for $200 you can build this thing, and it's portable. You can pick it up and move it to other parts of your house, around the outside to do different things. And so I'm just wondering if you've seen anything like that. And it was the kind of thing of, if you ordered right now, you could get this reduced rate for the information about how to do it, but it was actually fairly inexpensive. And I'm just wondering if you're familiar at all with this little system that managed to get all kinds of small solar panels producing quite a bit.
Do you remember the whole Earth catalog back in the 60s and 70s? They had ads for those things back there. They were different, I'm sure. But those things have been around for a long, long, long time. One more.
George, I was a little surprised to see that you had a ground-mounted system, because a lot of homeowners associations, they won't even allow them on the roofs, much less on the lawns. Would you say a little more about how you got that approved?
Well, I live in Fairway, and they're a little more forgiving. I live in Fairway, and they're a little more forgiving there. It took a while to get the ground mount approved by the local buildings guy, but once he got the Kansas PE certification on the system, he was happy with it. Now I have to get the electrical part approved, but then I'll be okay. I chose a ground mount simply because I don't have too much shade on the roof.
Okay, it's time for us to stop anyway. We will be back in the library, and everybody who can squeeze in there is invited to come. First, our honorarium for George.
Well, don't you get one, Rita?
No.
Well, come on, you did it too.
I already have more than one.
You have a set?
Something like that. It is U.S. and union made. I want you to know that's a very special mug.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. And next week's forum is our final forum for the year. And it has a very attention-getting title, Getting Naked for Change. And it gives you a website if you want to know more about it. That will be next week's forum. Everybody is also invited to stay for the service. Thank you very much.
Do I have to clap?
No, we're done.
Thank you.
And you're better off going out, leaving by that.
You ever heard of
Okay.
ships?
Do you want me to use that mic? Glamorous chair for Sarah. Oh, that's Jane. Jane takes voice lessons for me on Friday mornings, so she canceled from that. But she usually suffers from bronchitis or other crap. And, tell it. She's